Good morning, all of you. I guess there was some technical problem at Nikhat's end, so we could not start the session in time. Apologies for the same. Now, today we are going to start. Yes, so we are going to start again with the company law where we had stopped. And again, we're going to take the logical reasoning part. So, I hope you must have again read the discussions which we had on company law, so it becomes easy. I guess there were queries from students with respect to holding and subsidiary company. I think that concept still needs some kind of further discussion, so I'll just quickly take that concept so that if anybody of you have not understood, that can help you. So in terms of holding subsidiary, because this is a very important subject which is of prime importance even technically and even in case of a practical scenarios as well, because you would see a lot of holding and subsidiary. Okay, I'll not be able to take all the concepts again, but I'll try to highlight what is holding and subsidiary again for your reference. Okay, so we discussed about two things. One is what is company. Again, I'll repeat, company means a company which is incorporated and registered under the Companies Act. So that we are clear. We also discussed about what is body corporate. Now, in context of holding and subsidiary over here, body corporate can be a company which is incorporated outside India, is what we saw. Now, technically, we cannot call it as a company. The reason being it is not incorporated. So, say Microsoft Inc., or for that matter, Alphabet, which is the Google's holding company, or say, for example, any other Facebook Inc., which we discussed, or all such companies which you are aware of. So their parent entities are, or the establishment is in terms of where the company is situated. So be it the US, Australia, or any other country for that matter. So here, where the company is incorporated becomes the law as per their land, right? So here we cannot call it as, if it is Microsoft Inc., then of course we cannot call it as a company. The reason being it is not incorporated under the Indian Companies Act. Yes. So since it is not incorporated under the Indian Companies Act, we cannot call it as a company. But then there is a definition in the Companies Act which terms as, and I'll help you in the chat as well, which is called as body corporate. Now, what is body corporate? Body corporate, it is just like it has an attributes of a company, like it is a registered. Now, if you refer Microsoft Inc., right? It is as good as company, it is employing people. The only difference is it is incorporated outside India. So that's why, oh yes, it is a legal fiction, it has got perpetual existence, everything. If you see, the attributes are exactly same, but we cannot call it as a company because it is not incorporated and registered in India. So, how then Microsoft Inc., say for example, can do business in India? So, what they generally do is they kind of incorporate a company in India. Now, obviously, who is going to own it? It is the parent entity. That is, say for example, Microsoft Inc. holds 100% shares in the company which is incorporated in India. So, say for example, it can be Microsoft India Private Limited. So likewise, you will have an Indian company which is owned, that is whose shareholders are entirely a company situated or located outside India. So this becomes the holding subsidiary relationship. In simple words, what we call it as parent and child. So the parent is sitting in the US and the child is sitting in India. Of course, it can do business all over the world, and that is different. So, if we have to now correlate it with the subject or concept of subsidiary company, there are conditions by which you can say this company is a subsidiary company. Please understand, in case of a subsidiary, the words is subsidiary company or subsidiary. So it can also happen a reverse manner. So say for example, I was working prior to all my engagements with Quick Heal. If you must have heard about an antivirus company. So say for example, Quick Heal. Now, Quick Heal is an Indian company, right? Because it is a company registered in India. Now, if it incorporates, like if it owns, that is 100% stake of Quick Heal is, they start or they incorporate a company in the US. Now, who is going to be the holding company? So the Indian company is going to be the holding company, and where they incorporate a company in the US with 100% share capital, say Quick Heal Inc. or likewise, so a Delaware company. So here what is going to happen, an Indian holding company is having a subsidiary in the US by which they are owning 100% stake in that particular US entity. So subsidiary or a control can be established by way of the composition of board of directors. So when the particular entity has got a right to appoint or remove the majority of board of directors, then it can set to have a control in that company. So like I told you, if there is an agreement between say a bank and a company that we have the power to appoint or remove all of your directors, so they have an agreement. Now here there is no shareholding involved. Say the bank does not have a single share in the company, but because it can control the composition of board of directors, it can set to be a holding company, and the entity in which it controls becomes the subsidiary company. I also told you that this holding and subsidiary is in terms of shareholding, that is voting right or voting power, and it can be either by way of composition of board of directors. So, or we also saw the third category where A, B, C, the examples which we saw, that A holds 100% in B and B holds 10% and A holds 42%. So A becomes the holding company of B and C also, because it is by virtue of the subsidiary and itself, that is A plus B is more than 50%, that is 52%. So A is 42%, B is 10%, so 42 plus 10 becomes 52, and that's why A can be still said as a holding company of C, because either this condition gets satisfied. So if you see this A condition which is being mentioned, a company shall be deemed to be a subsidiary of the holding company if the control referred to in subclause 1 or subclause 2 is of another subsidiary company of the holding. So here A is holding what 42% and B is holding 10%. B is already a subsidiary of A, which is holding 100%. So 42 plus 10 becomes 52. And that's why C also becomes the subsidiary company of A. So this is, and if you see the definition of holding company, you need to first identify what is a subsidiary company. If that becomes a subsidiary, then also then you can say, oh, yes, the other is a holding company. So in relation to one or more other companies means a company of which such companies are subsidiary companies. So in order to check whether a particular company is a holding company or not, first you have to set the criteria for subsidiary company, check whether the subsidiary company definition and whether this can be treated as subsidiary, and then only you can say that the other then the other entity becomes automatically the holding company. So I guess this is clear to you. Uh, then, of course, we are going to go to the next thing. We discussed about, we'll go today. I'm going to complete company law, by the way. So we need to finish this because we are left with more of portion and we need to cover that as well. I can't stretch only on company law, unfortunately, since we have limited lectures to adhere to. Okay. So the term capital we have already discussed. It can be sort of the economist defines it in a different way. The accounting people define it in a different way. But as I told you, I have explained you the concept of pizza, and I told you this is the share in the share capital of the company, right? So we have cleared that. Now there are these types of classified capital. This is all in your accounting. And I'm sure you must have studied your accounting very well. Then you already have given accounts paper and all. This is just out of it. So I'll quickly explain this and I'll go to the other important concepts. So nominal and authorized or registered capital. So what is this? Nominal, authorized or registered, all these are synonymous words which are being used. So it can be either referred as authorized capital, nominal or registered capital. What is this? It is just a limit. It is a limit, that is a maximum cap within which the capital of the company should be. So say for example, the capital, authorized capital is 10 lakh rupees. So it is a notional number, by the way. Okay, it may or may not be true in terms of actual money which is brought in. So what I mean to say here is, if 10 lakh is the nominal or authorized share capital of a particular company, then that is a limit. Okay, so company cannot go beyond that. It can go, but it has to alter that limit. So it has to go through a procedure, and then only it can change. So that change is always possible. So you can go to upper limits as well. So if 10 lakh is the authorized share capital, you can increase, and you want to bring in 20 lakh of rupees as actual money. Now 10 lakh is the capital limit, so it is a limit set, notional limit, like I told you. You have to pay stamp duty on it. You have to pay the fees to the registrar for it. So now you're bringing in 20 lakh of rupees. So what can happen is you have to increase that authorized share capital by way of the procedure set in the company law, by taking shareholders' consent and everything. And then you can increase that 20 lakh. So there is no bar on increasing the share capital. But when it comes to decrease, it is not simple. You have to go through various routes, like it can be a buyback or it can be various other options. NCLT, of course, the capital restructuring and all. So I'm not touching upon that. Just at this point of time, remember that decrease in capital is not so easy process. Increase you can do any point of time. So this is just a notional limit, a limit or a bar beyond which you cannot go. If you want to go, you have to again increase that limit. So it's like just you are increasing the bar, increasing the limit. Issued capital is what? It is a company issues from time to time for subscription. It is that part of the authorized. So always remember, you understand the set, subset and the sets, right? So this issued capital is a subset of authorized capital. It can be equal to, but it cannot be greater than that. So issued capital is the company issuing from time to time for subscription. So it is that part of the authorized or nominal capital the company issues for the time being for public subscription and allotment. So this is, if you must have heard recently, there was a rights issue. If you must have heard about Reliance Industries, you must be hearing about it. There's a lot of buzz in the market about the Reliance Industries rights issue. So this is what they are issuing capital. Okay, they are willing, that they are calling people for subscribing to their capital. So this is what they are issuing the capital. What is subscribed capital? Subscribed part of the capital, which is time being subscribed by the members of the company. It is that portion of the issued face at face value which has been subscribed for by or for a for or taken up by the subscribers of shares in the company. It is clear that entire issued capital may or may not be subscribed. The reason being, you must have heard the concepts of oversubscription. You must have heard the concept of undersubscription. And that's why they're saying it is clear that entire issued capital may or may not be subscribed. So even if the company calls for people to subscribe their share capital, okay, now there are 1 lakh shares to be issued, is being issued by the company. But say for example, due to the COVID, nobody was interested in kind of investing their money in share capital, right, or shares of a particular company. So what people may not be interested in subscribing. So here what happens is the entire issued capital may not get subscribed. But if you now, just for example, if even if you Google or read the Economic Times, you may hear that Reliance rights issue got oversubscribed, meaning they are offering 1 lakh shares, but they got applications that people are interested to subscribe even more than 1 lakh. So that is what is called as oversubscribed or undersubscribed. So it can be either, but of course, when it gets oversubscribed means what? It is definitely going to be issued capital is equal to subscribed capital, because the eligible and pro rata, yes, somebody has texted me, pro rata things and becomes applicable, and then the entire issued capital is subscribed. Now, called up capital. What is this called up capital? Such part of the capital which has been called for payment. Now, here as well, you can remember. Again, I like to give you the same example because this is a very current buzz. You may also read Economic Times or any other paper for that matter, where the details of Reliance subscription issue is being given. Now they've called only for some portion. Now say for example, the share price which they have set is what, some 1200 plus rupees. Let's assume for a moment it is 1200 rupees. Okay, that is what they are going to call upon. Now there is a face value to it and there is a share premium attached to it. So whenever the valuation of the company is great, they may say that this share is at a premium value. Like the valuation of the company is high. So even if the face value of the share is 10 rupees, they are selling it at, or the company is issuing. The issuing is the right word over here. The company is issuing it for 1200 rupees. So here they are saying, okay, only part of the capital is called for. So here they would say is only out of 1200, only pay 300. So that is what they are called for right now. So they will say only 10% of the capital is called upon. So that way they can make calls. So 300 today, then after 4 months, 600 or likewise. So depending upon that, they can call the capital. So that is what is called as called up capital. Paid up capital means such aggregate amount of money credited as paid up as is equivalent to the amount received as paid up in respect of the shares issued, and also includes any amount credited as paid up in respect of the shares of the company, but does not include any amount received in respect of such shares by whatever name called. So say for example, if 10 rupees is the face value of the share, the paid up capital will be only 10 rupees. If 1100 rupees is the premium which you are paying, that is called as, and I'll also help you in the chat box, it is called as securities premium. Okay, securities premium, that becomes the securities premium. Is generally called as share premium, and the credit is given to the securities premium. So basically share premium, whichever is the premium, that is the valuation is high like I told you, and then they are then they are issued, the share is being issued at 1200 rupees. So that becomes the securities that goes to securities premium account. So that is called as paid up share capital. Then equity share capital is what we understand. Equity is a share with reference to any company limited by shares. Any company limited by shares means that part of the, okay, sorry, with reference to company limited by shares means all share capital which is not preference share capital. Now, for that, first you need to understand what is a preference share capital so that you understand what is an equity share capital. Okay, so preference share, as the word itself suggests, preference share capital means there is a preference. Okay, now you say, okay, I'll give preference to CA students than the law students. What you're saying, you're making a comparison that, okay, I'll give preference to you guys and then I'll give preference to some other students. So for that, you need to understand what is the preference, means what is a preferential treatment. And I'm using the word preferential treatment, okay? So what is the preference, on what grounds and on what basis, so that it becomes easy to understand that, okay, this is a preference share capital and this is not a preference share capital, means it is an equity share capital. So in case of preference, the preference is given in terms of two things. Okay, two things. First is the payment of dividend. This dividend, say for example, generally in the market, 6% preference shares are being issued, or say 7% or 5%, 4%. Now, what is this 4%? 4% is the dividend which is being paid on that preference shares. Okay, this dividend is kind of a fixed dividend. Generally, again, there are various types of preference shares, but just for this purpose right now, understand that 4% dividend means their payment is either a fixed amount or an amount calculated at fixed rate, which may be further against deduction of income tax or whatever is a income tax kind of thing, effect given to it or agreed between the company and the shareholder is different. But there is a percentage of payment of dividend which is there, and now there is an and provision. Please remember, whenever there is an and in between two kind of things, you have to complete both the things. Both the things should be kind of adhered to, should be fulfilled, should be complied. Then only you can say it is a preference share capital. And meaning dividend and repayment in case of winding up or repayment. So these preference shares, in case the company goes into winding up and say for example the creditors of the company are paid and there is say 10 lakh of rupees left with the company, and the preference share holders are amounting to say what 11 lakh rupees, and equity is 1 lakh. So 10 lakh rupees is left with the company after winding up. 11 lakhs is the shareholders of preference and 1 lakh is the equity shareholders. Now here comes the preference which is given to first fulfill the repayment of preference shareholders, and then only if something is left, then only the equity shareholders will get something, or they will get the repayment of their capital which they had put in the company. So the preference is in terms of dividend, and again I'm repeating, and repayment of capital. So this is something which you need to understand. This is a preferential treatment or a preference given or a preference right of the preference shareholders in respect of dividend and in respect of repayment of winding up capital. Now imagine that there is a share capital which has a right that, okay, in case of repayment they will get their repayment of capital first. Now whether can you treat them as a preference share capital? Would you call that such share capital as preference or equity? What do you think? I'll repeat again. Now, in terms of a share capital, if there is a condition that this share capital will get the repayment first. Now, whether this is a preference share capital or this is a equity share capital. Now, I see a lot of people saying preference share capital, but here is the trick which you have not understood. Yes, finally people are saying equity. The reason being, I told you both the conditions has to be satisfied, and there is a payment of dividend and there is a repayment of capital. So if only one condition is satisfied, it does not become a preference share capital. It will still be an equity share capital, but not preference share capital. Because if you see the definition, what is the definition? Equity share capital means which is not a preference share capital. So first you have to identify whether this particular capital is a preference share capital or not. If it satisfies both the condition and is there, remember, and is there, so both the conditions have to be satisfied. I said only there is a repayment, that there is a preference over repayment. I didn't talk anything on dividend, right? meaning there was nothing on dividend which was being agreed. So it does not become preference share. It remains equity shares, though it may have different classes of equity shares, but it does not become preference share. Okay. Now we are going to go to the board of directors. Okay, I due to paucity of time, I can't keep on explaining all the concepts. You will have to really focus because we have got very limited time. Okay, to the extent possible, I'm willing to kind of help you. But if I take all the concepts again and again, we'll never finish our portion. So you have to concentrate heavily when I'm explaining. Okay. So board of directors. So I hope you have understood the difference between equity and preference. Preference, payment of dividend, repayment. Okay, both the conditions have to be satisfied. Only one condition, no, it will still be an equity share capital. Now we are going to go to board of directors. We discuss this, what is board of directors in terms of, let me see how much I have to complete. Okay, great. Fine. Yes. So board of directors is something very sensitive. I told you that this is a unique feature for company. Okay. Company is with reference to the board of directors. Now we saw all other entities like we saw sole proprietorship, we saw partnership, LLP, HUF, that is Hindu Undivided Family. We have seen all these concepts, but none of where we saw this is a unique feature in terms of a company that there are two entities. One is the board of directors and the other is the shareholders. So board of directors are involved into the day-to-day management of the company. They are responsible for kind of taking the decisions for the company, and say for example right from check signing or be it employment of people. Now for example, do you there can be various heads who are reporting to the board of directors. So be it that HR head, finance head, or the other technical head, IT head, or whatever the heads are in the company, they are reporting to the CEO, or the CEO is reporting to the board of directors. So these board of directors are a group of persons who are kind of managing the affairs of the company. Okay, so this group of people are in terms of day-to-day management, and they have to go to the shareholders wherever the articles of association requires them, or in case the Companies Act or any other act for that matter requires that you need to go to your shareholders, take their consent, and then only you can do a particular kind of decision. So, but the first decision is taken amongst the board. Now, for example, if I have to again give you the same example of the rights issue first is being approved by the board that, okay, they find it, no, the company is in need of funds and it is better we, kind of have more funds for the company. So the first decision is being taken at a board level. And then they go to the shareholders seeking their consent in that particular matter. Or say, for example, it is a merger amalgamation matter, increase in share capital, or appointment of a person as a director on the company. So all this matter go back to the shareholders, but the first people who are approving it, it becomes at the board level. Generally, I'm talking about general things, that generally a decision is being taken at a board level. They approve it and then they go to the shareholders for their consent. So these board of directors are collectively called as board of directors. Individually, they are called as director. Okay. So who is a director? Now you may see fancy to people who are employees of the company, like director of HR, director of finance. Are they really directors? The answer is no, unless they are appointed to the board of directors under the Companies Act. Okay, just a person being designated as board of a director doesn't become director under the Companies Act. In case of a Companies Act, the person has to be appointed to the board. So that appointment by the board of directors, existing board of directors, is an essential feature. Just if I carry a tag that I am a director of finance, doesn't mean that I am a director in terms of the director of on the board of directors. Okay, that doesn't mean I am a director. Director means the person has to be appointed. Please remember this. This can be again important from your FAQ perspective. A director has to be a natural person. Like we saw that in case of shareholder, a shareholder can be a company, like we saw in the holding subsidiary where it is being entirely held by a company. So in case of a shareholder, it can be an individual, like you and me can subscribe. You and me can become a shareholder. It can be a LLP who can be a shareholder. It can be a company who can be a shareholder. A body corporate, a company incorporated outside India can be a shareholder. All these things can be a shareholder. But when it comes to a director, it has to be a natural person who can be a director. Okay, and collectively such directors are called as board of directors. So that's what is defined in section 2 subsection 10. Now we are going to see the requirements. As per section 149 of the Companies Act, the board of directors of every company shall consist of individuals only, like I was explaining you. Then 149(1) requires that every company, now the word is every company. Whenever there is a word every company, be it a private company, be it a small company, be it a Section 8 company, unless there is some exemption given, or be it a public limited company, uh, the every company means all the companies are included unless they have stipulated or unless there is an exemption which is provided. So company requires that every company shall have minimum 3 directors in case of public. So it is simple. Remember, one person company minimum, I'm talking about minimum means one has to be there. It can be 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, okay, but minimum one has to be there. So in case of OPC, that is one person company, that minimum threshold for directors. Please remember, we are talking about directors and not shareholders. Directors is what? Minimum threshold 1. Private company 2. And public limited companies 3. Minimum 3 directors. So 1, 2, 3. And shareholding is what? You have to tell me now. Shareholding for one person company is what? Yes, suddenly the chat box is silent. Yes, thanks. So one person company, in case of shareholders, it is one because that has to be one person means one member. Private company minimum how many members? Yes, two. Perfect. And in case of maximum, in case of a private limited, 200, right. So 200 and public limited, what is the minimum number of shareholders? 7. Absolutely. Good. Fantastic. I'm just loving this class. So 7 members. And what is the maximum limit in case of a public limited? Unlimited. Perfect. So I guess you are all brilliant in terms of understanding. So this is what it is. Now there is a limit on how many number of directors a company can have. So a company can appoint maximum 15 directors by passing a special, I guess there's some error here. A company may appoint more than 15 after passing a special resolution. This is the right statement. So a company can appoint maximum 15 and after passing special resolution, it can have more than 15 direct. There is an error in this sentence. Okay, don't ignore that. The sentence next to it is correct. A company may appoint more than 15 after passing a special resolution to that effect. So 15 is the maximum limit. If you want to appoint 20 directors, you pass a special resolution and you can have more directors. There is then of course, okay, just give me a moment. Yes. Now, the restriction of maximum number shall not apply to Section 8 company. Now, Section 8 company, there is no restriction on maximum number of directors. Now, 149(3) provides that every company shall have at least one director who has stayed in India for a total period of not less than 182 days. Now, understand this concept. This concept is called as, and I will also help you in the chat box. This is called as resident director. Okay, what is this resident director? And I'm just understand why this resident director was there. Now, earlier, what used to happen, we saw that there can be companies who are incorporating a company in India. So, say for example, a US based company incorporates a company in India. Now, what used to happen earlier in the era of 1956, because this provision is newly inserted in the Companies Act 2013. Earlier, there was no such provision. Now, what used to happen is the people, now say for example, the US based company incorporates a company in India. Now, the shareholders are obviously the US entity. The people who were employees of those company becomes the director of the company in India generally, or the people who are the promoters of the US company become the directors in India. Now, what used to happen, if I have to sue that company, if I am a lawyer and I have to sue that company for a particular purpose, now do you think I'll be able to anytime catch hold of the people involved with that company because they are sitting outside India? So it doesn't become very easy for us to kind of catch hold of those person if they're grossly committed a fraud or something like that. So then the extradition rules and everything, so it becomes a very tricky and very difficult process. I'm sure you must be seeing that though Vijay Mallya is sitting in the UK and what nuisance is being creating, and it is so difficult for him to bring in India and punish him for whatever he has frauds he has done or siphoning of funds he has done or whatever is being charged to him. So things become very difficult when person crosses the border of India. So that's why they have now, yes, Rana Kapoor, and there are so many people in terms of Nirav Modi. You can just name, and we know all these are offenders and things like that. So here, in terms of kind of catch holding, and we also saw the incident of Vadhavans where they were traveling and they got caught at Mahabaleshwar, which is very close to Pune. So here we know that how easy it becomes when people are in India and when people go outside India. So here, that's why this concept of resident director, that there is at least one person, one natural person whom you can catch hold of if there is, if this person has to be, and that's why this provision is applicable for all the companies. That now 182 days, you will ask why 182 days? It is a provision similar to what we have in income tax, the residency requirements as per the Income Tax Act, and this is being matched over here that 182 days in the previous calendar year. So the word is calendar year. Calendar year means Jan to December. So who has stayed in India for not less than 182 days. So that's why this resident director provision is there. Then we are going to see how are the directors appointed. So the first directors are generally the people who have subscribed to the memorandum. Now this is a technical provision because you have to name who are the directors while you fill up that Spice Plus form. So there is a Spice Plus form which is there for incorporation. Okay, so by which you can incorporate a company. So in that you have to put ideally who are the directors of the company, but the provision remains that the first subscribers, if not mentioned, those become also the directors of the company. But every director, this is a very important provision, every director shall be appointed by the company in general meeting, by which you understand that it is the shareholders' prerogative, it is a shareholders' right to appoint people on the board. Okay, so this is a shareholders' right, that who should be the board, who should be the people who are at a management level taking decisions for the company. Okay, now a person shall not be appointed as a director unless he has got DIN. Now this is called as DIN. DIN means director identification number. So if I want to become a director of a company, I need to first obtain the DIN and then director. This is a permanent number which is being assigned to a person. Of course, there is a KYC process nowadays, but unless and there are certain things attached to it. But as of now, you just remember this is kind of a permanent number, like you have PAN, right? Permanent account number from an income tax perspective. Similarly, if you have to identify that, okay, this is the person is a director in which companies, how many companies he is a director, then the ministry or other you can identify and understand that this person is how many is holding directorship of how many companies. So he has to furnish his DIN or such other number is and declaration that he is not disqualified to become a director. Now this disqualification, there are disqualification prescribed under the Companies Act, that when, like for example, you have become insolvent and you have adjudged as an insolvent, or likewise there are various disqualifications given. In that sense, you become, if you are disqualified, then you cannot act as a director. He has to give the consent, the person appointing. Now for example, if you are appointing me as a director, I need to provide my consent that okay, I'm fine with becoming a director of a company, because right, like we understand, there are rights and there are obligations on a director. So I should be consenting to be acting as a director. Now, unless articles provides for retirement of all directors at every AGM, not less than 2/3 of the total number of public company. Now, there is a concept before of director liable to retire by rotation. Retire, let me just put it in the chat box. No, it is not necessary. There is one question, one person can only be the director of one company. No, it is not such requirement. There have been, since it's not in your syllabus, I don't want to bombard you with the numbers. But there are restrictions that how many directorship you can hold. Based upon that, you have to hold that directorship. But it is not that you can be a director only in one company. Okay, directorship can be multiple. You can be in multiple companies. Bombard in the sense there are too many thresholds which are being provided. You have to already remember many thresholds. So I'm just helping you. Okay, let's move on to a very important thing, and please concentrate on here now. What is retirement by rotation? Retirement by rotation is an important feature, and you need to understand, unless the articles provide. So articles can provide that the directors, in case of a private company, they can provide that directors are not liable to retire by rotation. Now this goes back to the first concept that directors are appointed by shareholders, and that's why who is holding the longest term. Like for example, I'm holding, now there are 4 5 directors, among that I am holding the longest term. Then that becomes the person automatically if that there is not a provision in the articles, then I have to retire. Now what is retire? Then that the resolution is put before the shareholders that say Deepti is retiring by rotation. So by rotation, people are going to retire. They can be reappointed. So what can be the resolution put is Deepti is retiring by rotation and she is eligible for reappointment if the shareholders like that Deepti be still on the board of directors. So here the rotation retire by rotation will be applicable, and then again I can be reappointed by the shareholder. So who is the longest term, and all those calculations have to be made, and then 1/3 and 2/3, and likewise you can identify who is liable to retire by rotation, who is holding the longest office, and that person becomes liable to retire by rotation. Now we are going to go to the next concept of removal of directors. Now this removal, okay, there is one thing which is called as alternate director. Let me see, the articles has the power to appoint a fail. Yes, there is one concept which is called as alternate director. Alternate director is something like if here it is being mentioned, Companies Act empowers the board if so authorized by the articles. So the articles of association is important over here, that to act in the absence of original director during his absence for a period of not less than 3 months from India. So say for example, I am a director in a company, I have been traveling to, now I'm stuck in the US, or I have a business in the US. I'm there in US for 7 months. So in his absence for a period of not less than 3 months. So here I can appoint alternate director. Of course, it has to be again, appointment has to be there. I can just say that, oh, this is my alternate. and he will attend meetings on behalf of me. No, the person also has to be, I can propose that this person is should be my alternate director. When I'm not in India, this person can attend on my behalf. So that is what is called as an alternate director, in terms of alternately acting on my behalf. Removal of director. You must have heard about this famous issues which were Tata versus Mistry. Anybody heard before what happened? Tata versus Mistry case. There were a lot of kind of things. No, proxy is different. Alternate director is different. Okay, please remember. Proxy is different. Proxy is for the shareholder. Director, alternate director is for the director. And alternate director, like I told you, it has to be appointed by the board. And alternate director, again, that condition has to be fulfilled. A company may by ordinary resolution remove a director. Now, this was typically the case which has happened recently. You may want to read it. There's a lot of interesting stuff around it. Cyrus Mistry, absolutely. Cyrus Mistry was removed as a director, and there was a resolutions which were being proposed by the many of the Tata companies in which he was a director. So, what is this removal? A person, generally, I'll tell you, in practical life, people resign from the board. Now, for example, I am on the board of some company and I am not comfortable, or there are issues with the promoters and me. Then what is generally happens is I resign. That, oh, I'm no longer interested to be on your board, and fine, I'm resigning on from the directorship. But if I'm not interested in resigning, then of course the company and the shareholders basically has the powers to remove me as a director. Now, it is not something that, that there were a lot of issues and debate on going on, is still going on. Now, Cyrus Mistry has also made an appeal, counter appeal in the Supreme Court of India. Some things are yet to be settled in terms of what is the law. But just to help you, that a removal of director is also a shareholder's right. So, like I told you, appointment of somebody is also a shareholder's right. Similarly, a director can be removed by the shareholders. So, a company may by ordinary resolution remove a director not being a director appointed by the NCLT. Now, if the NCLT is appointed, then of course you cannot remove, but otherwise you can remove a particular person from the directorship. An independent director reappointed for the second term shall be removed by only passing a special resolution. So independent director who is being appointed for the second term be removed by only special resolution. Again, what is ordinary resolution? More than 50%, simple majority. NCLT, that is National Company Law Tribunal. Okay, so independent director, again, there is a lot of things which are attached to what is meant by independent director. But since it's not covered in your portion, I'll just help you in a very short manner, but don't take it, it's a full gamut of things on independent director, because there are a lot of conditions prescribed in section 149 subsection 6. You can go and read that if you're enthusiastic about it. But just to help that, now, for example, if it is about, take any company which is known to you, say, for example, if it is about Tata's, okay, or say if it is about Infosys for that matter. Infosys, we know that there is Mr. Narayan Murthy and all. So basically, the promoter stake is high in case of such companies. Now, it is also that there is a public shareholding involved, right? Now, if it is only the case that only the interest of promoters is being taken care of, then how is the public going to have confidence? So here the independent directors come into picture, who are supposedly the neutral people on the board of directors, who are going to assist the other promoter directors. That is, say in this case we are talking about Mr. Narayan Murthy or his son, or likewise or his the people associated with Infosys, who are promoters and who are also holding a maximum stake in the company. So here the independent directors give an independent decisions to the board They check, they are actually to be the duty of an independent director is to take care of all the stakeholders. So be it the shareholders, public shareholders, be it the creditors, be it the bankers. So they have to act independently for the benefit of such stakeholders. So they are not, since they don't have any relation, that is, they don't take salary from the company. So the moment I take salary from the company, what happens? I have to abide by whatever my boss says. I can't go beyond that to a certain level. So here they are not regulated. They don't take salary. They cannot take salary, otherwise they lose their status of independent. Plus they don't have other relations with the promoter. Like if I'm related to a promoter, then of course I'm going to bound by because I'm a relative, I'm going to be bound by whatever he says. Here they are not relatives of the director, or they are not related to the directors pecuniary. So there are thresholds on pecuniary transaction, shareholding, that how much you can hold, just to show or just to portray that they are not affected by any other matters. Like I told you, that if I'm a relative or if I'm taking salary, then I can't have an independent judgment given or an independent thinking process. So here that is being fulfilled by the independent director. Okay. So a special notice shall be required to remove a director. This is important. A vacancy created by removal of director, if he had been appointed in general meeting, be filled by the appointment of another director in his place at which he is removed. A director shall hold office till the date up to which his predecessor would have held office if he had not been removed. So if there is 2 months left, then that the other person has the term for only 2 months. Now we are going to go to another important subject, which is called as meetings of board. Now this is a very important chapter, and business ethics you're going to do on your own. So I'm not going to take business ethics unless you have some issues in that. So I'll be taking up to CSR in this today's lecture, and then we'll be ending on company law. Okay. Let me check what I've this. Meetings of director. Meetings of director are significant in terms of now, like I told you, if the decisions of the company are being taken by board of directors. Now, how are they going to take the decisions? It can't be like, they just call and do. So there has to be some formal process to it. And that's why this is also one of the disadvantages of a company, that there is too many of compliances attached to the functioning of a company. So be it the board of directors or be it the shareholders, there are procedures, there is systematic law on that what should be done by whom. Okay, so this is what is meetings of board. Now meetings of board mandates a company to hold minimum number of meetings. Now there can be two ways by which the meetings can be held. Now if I am now in this COVID scenario, it can be a physical presence, like okay, there are 4 directors, all of them meet at a particular place, and that can be treated as a meeting. So it is either through a physical presence, or the Companies Act recognize what is called as an video conferencing. Okay. Now, whether this meeting of WebEx can be termed as a board meeting, if considering that few of you are directors in the company, the answer would be no. Because no, the answer is no. The reason being, I'm not able to see you. Only you are able to see me. So it cannot be that under video conferencing also there are a lot of restrictions and conditions which are being put in the Companies Act, that all of them should see each other, all of them should see at a simultaneous manner, they should be able to hear. Now you're not, I'm not, I'm not able to see you at all. So it can't be said to be a video conferencing unless I'm able to see you. Okay. So if I'm just on telephone, can I be participating in the meeting of board of directors? The answer is no. Only telephonic way. So telephonic is not allowed as a medium by which you can attend a board meeting. It has to be an audio video session where all the people are able to see. There are various conditions to it, but remember, video conferencing is the valid mode, physical mode is the valid mode, is the only way by which you can attend a meeting. Now, how many meetings are required for the board? The first board meeting should be held within 30 days of incorporation. Now, please remember these thresholds and the number game over here, because this can be a likely FAQ for your exam, that the first meeting of board should be held in what days, like 30 days, 40 days, 50 days, 60 days. So the right answer is obviously 30 days. So the first meeting of the board should be held within 30 days of the incorporation. There shall be minimum of 4 board meetings every year, and not more than 120 days shall intervene between 2 consecutive board meetings. So what does this mean? Again, this is an important threshold MCQ for you. Please remember, they may give you a question on this. So how many board meetings are required? Minimum 4 in every year. Now, year means 12 months. It's not calendar, it's neither financial. The word financial is not used here. The word calendar is not used. So, within 12 months, there should be 4 meetings. Now, not more than 120 days shall intervene between 2 consecutive meetings. Now, how this is going to work? So, if there is a meeting in January 1st, there is a meeting, and the second meeting is being held on June 30. So is the provision complied? What do you think? Yes? No, absolutely. It is not complied, because the 120 days gaps has been, it has lapsed. So first meeting in January and the next meeting in June. So there is more than 120 days has passed. So this cannot be this company is not in compliance. Now there is a special provision for one-person company, dormant company, and small company, that at least one board meeting should be conducted in each half of the calendar year, and the gap between 2 meetings should not be 90 days. So this is a special provision for OPC, small company, and dormant company. However, this provision would not apply to one-person company in which there is only one director. The reason being, I cannot just have meeting with myself. You will feel ma'am has gone mad. She's having, if I say, oh, I'm having a meeting with myself, you will feel ma'am has gone mad. She's having a meeting with herself. That doesn't mean, so that's why there is a relaxation in the provision. If there is one-person company and only one director involved, then of course you need not have, then there is no board meeting at all, because one person cannot have a meeting with herself or himself. Board of directors of Section 8 company shall hold at least one meeting within every 6 calendar months. So 6 calendar months is being provided over here. Okay, directors may participate is what we have seen. 1/3 of total strength or 2 directors, whichever is higher, shall be the quorum of the meeting. Now, what is quorum? Quorum means that how many directors should be present at a particular meeting. Now, quorum is also for directors, quorum is also for shareholders. Now, what is this quorum? So, quorum means that how many people are present in that meeting is called as quorum. If the quorum here is what, 1/3 of total strength or 2 directors, whichever is higher. So again, this can be your MCQ, where they have given you that if there are 5 directors, 4 directors in a company, 2 directors attend, then what is, whether the quorum is fulfilled. What is your answer? If there are 4 directors and only 2 of them have attended the meeting, then whether the quorum has fulfilled or not. What do you think? I see yes, I see no. So how are you going to apply? 1/3 of 4 is what? 1 point something something, or 2 directors, whichever is higher. So 2 directors. So automatically 2 directors becomes the quorum for the meeting. So if 2 directors are present, yes, the company is compliant. So that is what is you understand by quorum. Yes. Now we're going to go to shareholders meeting. Shareholders meeting, again, like I told you, there are certain agenda items which require shareholders consent. Now, mandatory meeting of shareholders, any meeting of shareholders is called as general meetings. Okay, let's clear this funda. Any meeting of shareholders is called as general meeting. Now, there are 2 types of meetings. One is called as AGM. What is this AGM? AGM means annual general meeting. Now, this annual general meeting is a compulsory event for every company, be it any company. Annual general meeting, as the word itself suggests, it's only happening one time in the year. Basically, if you see, this is where it is being said, AGM is an important annual event where members get an opportunity to discuss the activities. What are the typical activities? Generally, these are financial statements audit. So once the audit happens, the financial statements are audited, the auditor gives its report, and of course these are laid before the shareholders, and that becomes the annual general meeting. Generally, this is, if you see, 30th September generally as a thumb rule becomes the shareholders AGM has to be completed before 30th of September. That is within 6 months of the closure of financial year. Now, what is financial year? It is April to March. That is 1st of April to 31st of March becomes the financial year, and 6 months after 31st of March becomes the kind of the last date for having your AGM. So this is where the provision is. Convening one such meeting every year is compulsory. It's a compulsory item. You cannot say I didn't, the company did not held the AGM. AGM should be held once in each calendar year. Between 12 months, there is one AGM definitely. Subsequent AGM should be held within 6 months of the close of the relevant financial year, and the gap between two AGMs should not exceed 15 months. This is all about AGM. Now there is another concept which is called as EOGM. What is EOGM? It is called as, or EGM, people say EGM or EOGM. EOGM means extraordinary general meeting. Now, any general meeting, that is any shareholders meeting between two AGMs is called as EOGM. Okay, any meeting which is between two annual general meetings is called as EOGM. That is called as an extraordinary general meeting. Now, this is AGM be called during business hours 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on a day which is not a national holiday. It should be either at the registered office or some place within city, town. So what is EU? No, it is EO, extraordinary general meeting. So it is EOGM generally, or howsoever, EGM or EOGM, extraordinary general meeting. Extraordinary, okay, forget about my caps lock and things like that. It is called extraordinary general meeting. Now, what are the agenda items discussed in the AGM? Like I told you, financial statements, audited financial statements, the report of board of directors, then dividend which is being declared, appointment of directors like we discussed who are getting retired, and remuneration and fixing of auditors remuneration. So these are the general items which are being discussed in AGM. There can be other items as well, but these are the most, that's why these are called as ordinary business. This all four items is termed as ordinary business. Uh, Yes, and any other item apart from this becomes a special business. I'm talking about special business means these four items. Now there can be also an MCQ for this, that these four items are given and it can be said this is a special business or ordinary business. So whenever these four items are present, it becomes an ordinary business. Any item other than this which is being discussed in a meeting becomes a special business. Of course, if there is a default conducted, then there is a penalty provision for that. Now we are quickly taking CSR, and then I'm going to take the logical reasoning aspect. Uh, CSR. Now this is a newly introduced concept. Before we read this, just have a read of these provisions. Just give me a moment and read by the time what is being mentioned where I'm highlighting 1, 2, 3. Just read for a moment. Give me just one moment. Okay. So what is CSR? Thank you. Okay. So what is CSR? CSR is again a newly introduced concept in the Companies Act 2013. Okay. This concept is a new concept, but not from like the provision is new, the concept is not new. So there have been CSR, if you must have heard Tata Memorial Hall, if you must have heard all other things, there are many ways by which the companies used to kind of contribute. But now there is a provision under Section 135 of the Companies Act, which is called as corporate social responsibility. The idea behind this concept is what? That the companies operate here, so they should give something back to the society. As simple as that is the concept. There is a threshold. Again, this is a very important thing from an MCQ perspective, that you need to learn this, and this can again be of MCQ. Which companies are required to spend their money on corporate social responsibility? The thresholds are rupees 500 crores or more of net worth, turnover of 1000 crore, or net profit of 5 crores. Now a question to you. What if a company is having 6 crores of profit? Okay, it is having 6 crores of profit, and it is having, say for example, 500 crores of turnover. Okay, it is having 500 crores of turnover, and it is having a net worth of 90 crores. So is CSR applicable? Okay, I see yes, I can see no. Why no and why yes? Why yes? If you're saying yes, it is applicable. Okay, I see lot many answers on this, but the thing which are important, and again I'm going to highlight, there is a or in between. What does or means? Either of the conditions should get satisfied. The moment I say that the net profit of the company is 6 crore rupees, the other criteria becomes meaningless. Okay, it becomes meaningless because the or is there in between. One threshold is being met, and that's why the company becomes eligible, the CSR becomes applicable for such companies, because there is or in between. So again, please remember, from your MCQ perspective, they will give you all these thresholds and they'll say whether CSR is applicable or not. So here you have to identify which, even if one threshold is being met, it becomes applicable. Okay, I hope you have understood. So here, I didn't say gross profit, by the way, I said net profit. Okay, fine. So the board of directors, now this is when we understand that the CSR becomes applicable. Now, just a moment. Okay, so the board's report shall disclose the composition of CSR. Now, this is a committee which is formed under the board of directors. There is a threshold which is given in your module. Please go through it. We'll discuss further more concepts. Okay. Uh, the report shall disclose the composition of CSR committee. That is, who are the directors who are going to form the CSR committee. It is a subset of the board. So board is of 10 people. CSR committee can be of 4 people. Okay, amongst the board. So the composition has to be left. Okay, I know the Nikhat, can we extend the session to further 10 minutes? Is that possible? Because since we have started the session late. Nikhat, can you answer me? Oh, I guess he's saying no, we can't extend it. Uh, okay, fine, no problem. We will take the logical reasoning in the next period. I'll complete the CSR, okay? So that at least we are finishing the company law. And then we will take the logical reasoning part next, in the next session, okay? Uh, so here, CSR shall formulate what are the responsibilities of this committee, formulate and recommend to the board what activity. So basically, what does this committee do is the committee is going to discuss that, okay, which project. So say for example, if it is eradication of hunger, poverty, malnutrition. So basically, what all the activities are covered and under which you can do CSR is what I had asked you to read. So activities which may be included in the CSR. So if you see this page, eradication of hunger, education, in nutshell, whatever India needs, where a private funding is required, all these are things are covered in the CSR. So it can be setting up of homes, hostels, ensuring environment. So today is World Environment Day. So anything related to environment, Clean Ganga project, or other national heritage, cultural. So if COVID related things, yes, if there is a sanitation which is being provided. So if a company is providing something to the migrant workers, if they are helping out today, or if they are providing sanitary products, or if they are providing sanitation related areas for COVID, likewise. So there can be ways in which you can do CSR. So what this CSR committee does is CSR committee finalizes that which activities should be there, in terms of which activities the company should be indulging into, and then they decide what amount of expenses should be there for a particular activity. So if it is tree plantation, then how many trees be planted, or what should be the cost should be allocated to the project, or if it is an education, orphanage related, or any other things, then what should be the cost allocated to it. That is what they recommend to the board, that okay, these is where the kind of things by which the company can do their CSR activities, then the board approves it. Okay, so now what is the minimum threshold for this? Every company shall ensure that the company spends in every financial year at least 2% of the average net profits made during the immediately preceding financial years. So how much amount can be spent is 2% of the average net profit. So if the company is today having 10 crores of profit, and last year was some 12 crores, and day after was 15 crores, so you have to take an average of it, 10, 12 plus 15, and then so divided by 3, whatever you get the number, into 2%. So that is how you have to calculate the 2% of the CSR, which is the average net profit. So like I told you, 10 plus 12. So say for example, 10. Yes, so that would be 2.4, whatever is that, the calculation is correct. So 10 plus 12 plus 15 divided by 3, by which you get the average net profits, and that into multiplied by 2%. So that is your CSR expenditure for the particular financial year. Now, this is what generally any unspent. Now, these regulations are there in your syllabus, but these are yet to be notified. This has not become the law of land yet, but this is for your information. In case any unspent amount is there currently, like I'm telling you, this is not there. The notification for this three provisions which I'm mentioning you, unspent amount related, are yet to be notified. But this is for your understanding. Unspent amount, if there is an ongoing project and the amount has not been fulfilled, spent, then within a period of 6 months of every expiry, you have to form a unspent unspent amount to be transferred to a fund. So this is what is being mentioned, and how the transfer is going to happen to an unspent corporate CSR account, and from there to the fund, is what is being mentioned over here. And of course, there is a penalty provision which is being applicable. You can go through this. This is a general area where the CSR funds are required. Now, I'm also going to help you with the topics of logical reasoning, which you have to study and come. So that we are going to take that first, and then we will start with, mostly I start with contracts. Okay, I'll start with a contract because it is again a very important subject and hard to understand. So I generally focus on things which would not be very easy for you to understand. Okay, so we did drawing inference. This you're going to do for your homework. I'm not going to take this conclusions, deriving conclusions on passages, because this is a very big chapter, and if we start reading the passage, our entire lecture will go in reading the passage. So you're going to do this. Okay, okay. So you're going to do this on your own, deriving conclusion from passage. And then we are going to take a bit of what I had suggested is, yes, cause and effect. We are going to take, and we will take the other remaining coding also. I'll help you a bit because this requires pen and paper for you to understand. So coding will take, and then cause and effect is what I have told you. Yes, then we'll be done with this chapter. So coding and things. So let's number again. We can take number as well. So number. So we will be concluding tomorrow, not tomorrow, the next session. This chapter sequence is also easy. So we'll be taking few examples of it, statement and assumption as well. So we'll be taking few examples of it, and we'll be finishing this chapter next. And I'll also start with contract. Okay. So see you. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Yes. Thank you. Take care.